coach after just one day. The search is over. The Cowboys have agreed to a 5-year deal with Mike McCarthy, who spent 13 seasons as Green Bay's head coach, made the playoffs 9 times, including a win in Super Bowl 45. Dallas certainly needs a strong voice in that locker room after woefully underachieving this year. Greg Jennings, you played for McCarthy for 7 years. We're going to get to you in a second. Your take on what you think all this means. But, Nick, I'll start with you. You think the Cowboys got this one right?
I think the Cowboys got this right-ish. On a scale of 1 to 10, I give it a 6.5. If Dan Mullen's a 1, and if Josh McDaniels is a 9, and stealing away Bill Belichick or Sean Payton would be a 14, then I give this a 6.5. I think they did the most important thing, in my eyes, they needed to do. They got a credible NFL head coach with NFL coaching experience, not a guy who could go one way or the other, a guy who could totally flame out or turn into the next great coach. They went with the safer choice. It's the route, by the way, that I thought a team like the Cleveland Browns would have been well suited in taking a year ago, because you had all this talent in place and what you wanted to do was not screw it up. The Cowboys have all this talent in place. They need someone they know can come into a locker room, and you can speak to this far better than me, and command the respect of the grown men in that locker room. So why do I only have it as a 6.5? Well, I thought he deserved to be fired in Green Bay. I thought the scheme had grown stale. And I understand he spent a weekend with our friends at Pro Football Focus. I don't know if that is enough to totally remake an offense or remake an offensive mind. And I do want to see how he's evolved, how he's learned, how he's grown from what ended up being, in my mind, a disappointing end of his era in Green Bay. Not just the firing and the missing the playoffs, but not taking full advantage of the peak prime of Aaron Rodgers. But people do learn from failure, or learn from embarrassment. I think the end of his time in Green Bay, he would call a failure, and he certainly was embarrassed by the fact they wouldn't even let him finish out the season. And the Cowboys could have done far worse. So I don't know if this is an inspiring hire, but I don't think it's a terrible hire. And I think he is an instant upgrade over the previous coach in Jason Garrett.
This is definitely an upgrade. This is definitely the right move. His coaching resume speaks for itself. He's had success where he's been, which has been Green Bay as a head coach in 13 seasons, making 9 playoff appearances, 1 Super Bowl championship. And when you look at the talent that he's had around him, as far as personnel, he's been able to get pretty much the most out of it. Now, we've grown to this idea of labeling his offense, and I've been one to say it, growing stale and being boring and lacking innovation. Well, when he started out, that was not the case. It was an innovative offense. It was exciting. It was electric.
The league just changed fast.
The league
exactly. The league changed, and sometimes as a head coach, because you've had so much success, which we've seen, he's had so much success in his seasons. His offensive yards per game and total yardage, all top 5 points per game, like top 5 in those categories. So you would be hesitant as a head coach to make changes and to continue to switch over to what you are seeing now as the innovative way of calling offensive game plans when what you've done has always worked. And I will say this, just because it grew stale for someone like myself or Aaron Rodgers, it grew stale for Aaron Rodgers because he's so savvy, he's so smart, he's so above the elite level to where you have to be able to challenge someone like him and create and draw up different looks and formation variations to where he can be excited about what's being presented in front of him.
Well, there is an element where if someone has 6 great stories, that those stories might grow stale for their friends from college. But if you have a whole new group of friends, those stories work great. There's an element of it might have grown stale for yourself after 7 years, for Aaron after a dozen, but it wouldn't be stale at all as far as to the minds of the players in the Dallas Cowboys locker room. The question is, have defenses caught up to it? Has he evolved according to the league? But that nobody's really going to know until we see how their game plans play out in the 2020 season. What about the non-X's and O's stuff? What about someone who's been in the locker room, and so much of coaching in the NFL is inspiration, is preparation, and is getting, Chris Canty says it all the time, getting grown men to do things they don't want to do to become the men they want to become. What about that part of Mike McCarthy as far as someone who's played for him?
Well, he's not a rah-rah guy. He's not the guy that's going to give you an electrifying pregame speech or beginning of the week speech leading up to a game or a big game. He's a responsible, you farm your own land individual, which in this league, guys say that's what they want. I want a coach that's going to trust who I am, what I do, what I provide, and allow me to be me. Well, this is Mike McCarthy. He's not going to be the guy that's going to bring you into the office or have a word of encouragement every single time that's going to fire you up and get you ready to play. But what he will do is have you prepared, meaning a guy like Dak Prescott, he's going to get him in early in the week all the time. Other guys, the receivers, they're going to all be on the same page. They're going to understand what they're trying to accomplish as an offense, and that's what you're going to ask of him. Not defensively. You're going to let Mike Nolan take care of that and do his thing, but Mike McCarthy is, I believe, he's a great hire, and I don't think he's a safe hire. I think he is the right hire because he has done some exciting things in this National Football League. Has it evolved? It has. But what we've seen and what I watched just yesterday, some of his Mike McCarthy project and all those things, and him trying to evolve and really listening to what has been said about him and his offensive approach. He's not going to change that, but he's going to add to it, and I think that's important.
The last time we saw Mike McCarthy, it wasn't great for him. Issues with the organization in Green Bay, issues with Aaron Rodgers. We weren't sure who was to blame and how that relationship dissolved. What do you think Mike McCarthy said to Jerry Jones when they sat down to convince him that he was the exact right answer for the questions that Jerry Jones had for this Dallas team?
I truly don't think he had to say too much. I truly believe Jerry Jones saw and identified Mike McCarthy as a guy that was proven, who had won in this league, who had played with two Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and who can take an organization of historic, legendary players in history and all this past, what they've had success, and bring it to fruition and manifestation now. He truly believed that, and all Mike had to do was show that he was going to comply to a certain degree, but bring his own level of energy and his own mentality and his own brand to where it would enhance where they are right now.
Jerry pretty clearly targeted him. This was his #1 choice. Like, they didn't go through a long, drawn-out interview process. They interviewed reportedly McCarthy and Marvin Lewis, and Marvin Lewis has some of the same characteristics as Mike McCarthy, but not any playoff success. Well, McCarthy obviously won a Super Bowl, even if his last, the big question mark on his resume is the way those Packers season ended post-Super Bowl. It's playoff disappointment after playoff disappointment, including some bad home playoff losses. He's going to have to answer for those until he has some playoff success in Dallas. But the biggest adjustment for McCarthy, who had some opportunities last year, I think smartly laid in the weeds, if you will, for a year to see what the full landscape would look like, so he didn't take a bad job, because in this league, you almost always, if you're a guy like Mike McCarthy, get a second bite at the apple. You very rarely get a third, so you want to make sure you take the right opportunity. The biggest difference is who owns the Green Bay Packers? Nobody or everybody, depending on how you want to look at it. They are owned by the city. He was the only voice, the only face of that organization from a management perspective. You never heard from Ted Thompson. I think there was an element of frustration for McCarthy, reportedly, according to the people who know him, that he always had to answer for decisions that he maybe didn't even make. You go from that end of the spectrum to the most visible, vocal owner in all of American professional sports, Jerry Jones. Now, maybe he'll like that. Maybe he'll like the fact that it doesn't all fall on him. That if there's a free agent that doesn't play well, people aren't pointing at him because he's the only voice and face of the organization. But it is a major adjustment from the great citizens of Milwaukee owning the team to Jerry Jones, one of the most powerful people in the entire sports world, owning the team, and someone you're going to hear from twice a week on the radio and every single game, every single Sunday after you play.
And probably every single day. And that's going to be the big question moving forward that we're going to talk about: compliance and how much is